The moment the courtroom lights flickered against the polished wood, I knew Emma hadn't come for closure. She'd come for recompense. Her eyes didn't carry sadness, they carried calculation. Across the table, her lawyer shuffled papers like a magician preparing a trick, while mine, Greg, sat steady, his fingers locked in quiet readiness. 3 months earlier, I would have sworn I knew her. We'd spent 4 years building what I thought was a shared life: coffee rituals, Sunday markets, whispered plans for maybe someday. But now she was a stranger wearing a memory's face, saying I owed her half my savings because we'd built a home together. The same home I'd bought with my grandfather's inheritance. It's strange how fast love can turn into litigation. When the mediator asked for opening statements, I barely listened. My focus was on Emma's expression. There was a trace of fear under her confidence, like she wasn't entirely sure her story would hold. Maybe that was my imagination, or maybe I'd just learned to see her clearly for the first time. I'm Daniel Hayes, 31, software engineer, Seattle. I'm the kind of man who keeps receipts for things no one else would: groceries, gas, even coffee runs. I never thought that habit would become my defense. Back when Emma moved in, she was between jobs, selling jewelry online, teaching yoga on weekends. I covered the rest. It wasn't charity, it was love. Or what I thought love was: paying the bills without keeping score. That Tuesday night she left, the apartment felt heavier, not emptier. I packed her boxes, helped her carry them down the stairs, even tipped the movers. We didn't fight. We didn't cry. It was quiet, like closing a door on a version of ourselves we'd both outgrown. A month later came the text: "We need to talk about money." The sentence was clinical, detached. Still, I called her, thinking it was about splitting furniture or returning mail. Instead, she told me I owed her half of everything I'd saved while she supported me emotionally. That was the moment something in me rewired. Love became ledger. Memory became evidence. And I realized, this story wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about proof. The text exchange had barely ended before the letter arrived. Thick paper, embossed seal, the kind of envelope meant to intimidate before you even open it. Inside was the claim: unjust enrichment. Emma wanted $47,000, half my savings during the time we lived together. Reading it felt like being accused of a crime I hadn't realized existed. Greg, my lawyer, met me the next morning. He read the letter twice, then looked up and said, "Do you have records?" I nodded. He smiled faintly. "Then we'll let the math do the talking." That's what Greg understood about me before most people did. I don't argue feelings, I track facts. My laptop became an evidence vault: spreadsheets, PDFs, scanned receipts. Every bill I'd paid, every Venmo transaction, every timestamp of a grocery delivery. When you live with someone, you don't think about how many invisible ways you subsidize their life until those moments become itemized lines of defense. Still, none of this felt like winning. I'd scroll through years of shared purchases: her yoga mats, the ring light she used for Etsy photos, the weekend getaway to the coast, and I couldn't stop the echo of our laughter from bleeding through the data. Proof didn't erase memory. It just quantified the cost of it. Greg started discovery proceedings. Emma's lawyer, Andrea, filed minimal disclosures: a few studio pay stubs, a scatter of Etsy sales. That was it. It wasn't just weak, it was hollow. Greg drafted a motion to compel, and as I read through his 47-page breakdown, I felt something new rise inside me: not anger, but disbelief. How had love become a financial audit? At night, the apartment hummed with a quiet kind of loneliness. Her things were gone, but traces lingered: hair ties, her chipped mug still in the cabinet, the faint scent of sandalwood from her diffuser. I didn't miss her. I missed who I thought she was. When the court date arrived in early October, Greg told me to expect theater. "They'll play emotion. We'll play evidence," he said. It wasn't until that morning, when I saw Emma step into the mediation room in a crisp white blouse, her eyes steady and rehearsed, that I realized this wasn't just a lawsuit. It was a performance. And somewhere in the audience, I was still learning my role. The mediator's office looked like it belonged in a commercial: soft lighting, muted art, bottled water lying neatly on a glass table. But beneath that calm was tension so thick it felt like static. Emma sat across from me, her hands folded like she'd rehearsed composure. Andrea, her lawyer, wore the kind of confidence that comes from billing by the hour. Philip, the mediator, began with protocol. Miss Carter, you're claiming unjust enrichment. Please outline your contributions to the household. Emma's eyes darted toward Andrea, then back to me. I cooked. I cleaned. I supported him emotionally. I made his life livable. Her words landed softly but felt rehearsed, each one chosen to sound noble. Philip nodded, patient. And financially? She hesitated. When I could. How much, roughly? Silence stretched. That was Greg's cue. He slid a thin stack of documents across the table: bank records, transaction summaries, highlighted notes. Your Honor, these are Ms. Carter's own statements from discovery. Over the course of 42 months, she made 3 payments totaling $225. It was quiet enough to hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Emma's face flushed crimson. Those aren't the only. Philip interrupted gently. Did you pay rent? Utilities? Insurance? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Andrea leaned in, whispered something. Emma's jaw tightened. I need a break, she said abruptly. They left the room. The door clicked shut. Greg leaned toward me, voice low. We're done here. When they returned, Emma's eyes were red. Andrea's expression had collapsed from confidence to fatigue. Ms. Carter would like to withdraw her claim, Andrea said. Just like that. No apology. No explanation. Just silence, as if the fight had evaporated. We signed the papers. It was over, legally at least. Outside, the October air bit cold against my face. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. The numbers had saved me, but they'd also stripped everything else away. The woman I'd once loved had tried to turn my life into a settlement, and in dismantling her claim, I'd dismantled the last illusion that love and fairness ever shared a language. I thought it was the ending. It wasn't. It was the warning. Weeks passed after the case closed, but peace never came. I'd won on paper, yet every small victory felt like another reminder of what had decayed inside me. The apartment stayed spotless, almost sterile. I told myself it was discipline, not emptiness. But each time I walked past the window where we used to sit and plan vacations we never took, I could feel the air tighten, like the space itself was waiting for something unresolved. Greg called once to check in. You did the right thing, he said. Most people would have folded or paid her off. Yeah, I said, staring at the faint outline of her name still ghosted on the mailbox label. The right thing never feels right, though. At night, I started sorting through old drives, photos, voice notes, receipts of shared trips. Not to reminisce, but to understand. Somewhere between the deleted images and half-written notes, I began seeing the cracks I'd ignored. The subtle ways she'd kept me uncertain, praising me when I overextended, pulling away when I didn't. It hadn't been partnership, it had been quiet manipulation dressed as affection. Then, one evening, I got an email. No subject line, no greeting. Just a message: I'm sorry for how it ended. You didn't deserve that. It wasn't signed, but I knew. I stared at it for a long time. For the first time, anger didn't rise, just an ache I couldn't categorize. She was somewhere out there, possibly convinced that a single line could undo what her lawsuit had etched into me. I typed a reply. Then deleted it. Then typed again. I hope you find peace. But not at my expense. I didn't send it. Some truths lose their meaning once spoken aloud. A storm rolled through the city that night, rain slamming the glass like a drumbeat. The power flickered, the room glowed in flashes of gray. I stood at the window, watching lightning fracture the skyline, and realized this was what closure actually looked like: not calm, not forgiveness, but understanding the damage well enough to stop looking back at it. By dawn, I decided to leave the apartment. Not because I had to. Because staying meant living in the echo of something already gone. The morning I moved out, the city was drenched in fog. The movers were late, which left me alone with the final boxes and the sound of the radiator hissing like it had something to say. I walked through each room slowly, touching walls, checking sockets, making sure nothing of mine, or hers, remained. It wasn't nostalgia. It was inventory. A reckoning. In the living room, I found the last thing I hadn't expected to see, a framed photograph behind the bookshelf. It was from our first trip together, Cannon Beach, 2 years ago. She was laughing, hair tangled in the wind, and I was looking at her like she was the only thing in focus. I almost tossed it in the trash. But I didn't. Instead, I set it on the counter, staring at it under the dim kitchen light. For the first time, I didn't see the woman I'd loved or the one who tried to sue me. I saw a person, flawed, scared, maybe even broken in ways that had nothing to do with me. The photo wasn't a reminder of betrayal anymore. It was proof that for a while we had both tried. Maybe that was enough. Outside, the movers finally arrived. I signed the forms, handed them the boxes, and locked the door for the last time. The click of the latch was louder than it should have been. On the drive across town, rain began to fall, blurring the skyline into watercolor. I pulled over near the waterfront, got out, and walked to the edge where the water met the concrete. The photo was still in my jacket pocket. I held it there for a moment, fingers trembling, not from sadness, but from the weight of release. Then I let it fall. It hit the water face down, the edges curling as it sank beneath the surface. For a heartbeat, I waited for regret. None came. Just quiet. Behind me, the city kept moving, cars, voices, the hum of living things. I realized Emma and I had both been trying to win something that couldn't be owned, the right to feel right about the past. And finally, I didn't need to win. I just needed to go. A month later, I woke in a new apartment where the morning light spilled across bare floors. No curtains yet, no framed photos, no ghosts. Just space. The kind that hums with possibility and quiet. I made coffee and stood by the window, watching the city wake. It felt different here, less like escape, more like beginning. Greg emailed that morning, confirming the final court filings had cleared. The case was officially closed. I stared at the message longer than necessary, waiting to feel something monumental. But the truth was, closure didn't arrive with signatures. It came in moments like this, breathing, steady, unremarkable. I started running again. 3 miles before work, sometimes 4 on weekends. I liked the rhythm, the anonymity of movement. No one knew my story out there. No one cared. That was freedom. One evening, I ran past a small art market by the pier. A woman was selling jewelry, silver, hand-shaped, delicate. For a second, I almost turned away. But I stopped, bought a ring shaped like a wave, and slipped it into my pocket. Not as a reminder of her, but as proof I could touch something beautiful without needing to own it. Sometimes I think about emailing Emma back, responding to that unfinished thread. I imagine writing something simple, "We both survived." But I never do. The past doesn't need acknowledgement to stay real. It just needs to stop being rewritten. The city lights blur in the distance as night falls, and I catch my reflection in the window, older, maybe harder, but finally aligned with the truth. The person I was when I met her wouldn't have survived this version of me. And that's the point. I take a breath and turn away from the glass. The air smells faintly of rain again, the kind that rinses rather than floods. Tomorrow, I'll hang curtains. Maybe by a plant. Maybe not. Life feels less like rebuilding now and more like continuing. The silence isn't lonely anymore. It's honest. And somewhere, beyond the static of what once was, I can almost hear the faint sound of something starting. Not love, not revenge, just peace finding its way home.